Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Georges River Local Planning Panel for the 18th of August 2022. My name is Stephen Alchin and I'm the chair of the panel. The panel is coming to you via streaming from the council office in McMahon Street in Hurstville. The members who make up the panel today are Awais Paracha on my right, Annette Rahotis on my immediate left, and Cameron Jones, the community representative. Awais and Annette are expert panel members. We're the panel who have been appointed by the Minister for Planning to determine specified development applications, including the development applications that are on the agenda for today, in accordance with the requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The panel acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which this meeting is being broadcast, that of the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm required to advise you that under provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, this meeting of the panel is being live streamed and will be available on Council's website. In accordance with the revised meeting protocols during COVID, interested parties wishing to make representations to the panel were requested to register a summary of their interests. 9 registrations were received and forwarded to the panel. The panel has reviewed the registrations and advised the council officers they wish to hear oral submissions from the following persons, who will be called during the course of this meeting in order of the items as published on council's website. They are Andrew Young, Frank Nastasi and Lisa Bella Esposito, all available to make a short address or answer questions in relation to the development application for 99 Forest Road, Hurstville. Mark Swain would be next. He has registered an interest to talk about the development application for 138 Lugano Parade, Lugano. Aaron Sutherland has registered an interest to talk about the development application, the modification of the previous development consent for 61 to 75 Forest Road and 126 Durham Street in Hurstville, and that there are 4 parties who've registered an interest in talking on the development application at 19 Woodlands Avenue, Lugano. They are Kim Roth, Max Eldebel, Rakia Eldebel and Alan Paglioni. The panel has received a completed assessment report from council staff for the 5 development applications that are before us today. We've undertaken an inspection of the sites and nearby locality for the 5 matters that we will be considering. We'll deal with each application in order as published on council's website. Those applications are for 99 Forest Road, internal alterations to a mixed-use building for the fit-out and change of use of commercial premises to residential units. A development application at 138 Lugano Parade, Lugano for alterations and additions to a dwelling house and outbuilding. Modification of a development consent for a property at 61 to 75 Forest Road and 126 Durham Street, Hurstville. This is the modification of consent number DA 2020/0352 for demolition works, remediation and construction of a mixed-use development comprising 4 buildings, being from 3 to 20 stories in elevation, containing commercial floor space, a 76-room hotel and 260 apartments above 4 levels of basement containing 476 car parking spaces, landscaping, site works and a stratum subdivision. The 4th development application relates to 19 Woodlands Avenue in Lugano. It involves alterations and additions to a dwelling house. And the final application is for a development at 261 to 265 Princess Highway and 1B Ecole Street in Carlton, involving demolition works, alterations and additions to an existing building and change of use to a health services facility. As required by the Local Planning Code of Conduct, panel members are required to disclose any conflicts of interest in respect of any matter on the agenda for a panel meeting. The relevant forms are prescribed by the Department of Planning, have been completed and a table for council to be included in the online minutes of this meeting. No panel member has disclosed any conflict of interest in any matter on today's agenda. As we progress through the matters on the agenda, only those persons who have registered to speak will verbally be able to make representations to the panel. Each person who has registered to speak is requested to limit their presentation to 3 minutes. I'd ask those persons that are invited to speak to the panel via Teams that they speak clearly and at a volume that will project into the speakers to assist those viewing the live streaming so they can clearly hear clearly what is being said. To manage the live streaming process, all speakers should leave their camera and microphone turned off until their turn to speak is called. At this time, I would remind people or persons that any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language used may result in the author being exposed to liability for which counsel and the panel take no responsibility. Once we've heard all the oral submissions on a particular application, we'll move on to the next application. Members of the public are free to continue to listen to the broadcast. The determination of the application will be made in closed session, which is not live streamed or recorded. The determination will be available on Council's website once confirmed by the panel, and this will occur usually within 2 to 3 days of the meeting being held. That's the end of my introduction, so we'll now proceed to the first item, which is the development application for 99 Forest Road at Percival. The three speakers who have indicated they're available to answer any questions we may have. But before we do so, do you have any quick submissions or points that you would like to raise or stress with the panel?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. My name is Lisa Bella Esposito, and I am the Director of Milestone and the applicant of this application, and undertook the comprehensive environmental assessment. And on either side, I have 2 representatives from development managers from the Development East Quarter Group. I'm simply here as a courtesy to advise you that I have reviewed the council officer's report, including the recommended conditions, and we have no objections or further comments, and we've simply made ourselves available if the panel members had any clarifications or questions. Otherwise, we concur with the recommendation and respectfully request that the panel adopt it.
Thanks, Ms. Esposito. I don't have any questions. Do any members of the panel have any questions for the applicant or their advisors? No? Thank you for making yourself available, but there are no questions. So once again, thanks, and the minutes will be issued in short order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
The next application is concerns the development at 138 Lugano Road, or Lugano Parade rather. Lugano. Mr. Mark Swain has indicated his desire to address the panel. Are you there, Mr. Swain? Yes, you are. I can see you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Chair, members of the panel. Similar in relation to the last item, I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property. I'm the consultant town planner that prepared the statement of environmental effects. We've reviewed the report and commend the officer. Happy with the report and conditions attached to the consent, and simply here to answer any questions which would otherwise dissuade you from doing anything but adopt the recommendations. So.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. Do any members of the panel have any questions? No, there are no questions. So likewise, thank you for making yourself available this afternoon. We'll make our decision, and the minutes will come out shortly.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. The next person who has registered to speak is Aaron Sutherland in respect of the modification of the consent for the development at 61 to 75 Forest Road and 126 Durham Street in Percival. Mr. Sutherland, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is starting to sound somewhat like a broken record, but I'm the consultant town planner for this particular application and this modification. Look, we've worked closely with council. The modification represents quite a number of improvements to the project, and in particular in relation to benefits to the public domain. And again, we're very pleased with the recommendation, and we commend the recommendation to the panel, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have of me.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Any questions from panel members on this particular matter? Yes, Mr. Jones.
I was just wondering, was there any further attempts made with amalgamation of adjoining properties in this second application, or during this process of the modification?
Look, no, there wasn't. In terms of an amalgamation of additional properties at this stage, at a section 455 would likely generate a problem in relation to substantially the same development. So no. So the consent has been granted, and we've looked to improvements to the consent as granted.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Was Annette? And nor do I. No questions. Matters are addressed clearly in the council officer's report. So thanks, Mr. Sutherland. And as I've said with the other applicants, the minutes will come out shortly, and you'll hear from us accordingly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair and panel.
The next item, says he's trying to just make sure I've got my agenda correct, is the development application for 19 Woodlands Avenue, which is a dwelling house and modifications to the house. There are a number of speakers who've asked to address the panel. The first of those is Kim Roth, who is, as I understand it, a consultant representing a submitter. Miss or might be a Ms. No, it's a Mr.
Mr. Roth, that's okay. I'm used to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, panel. Yeah, I'm here to represent the owners of the next door property at 21 Woodlands Avenue as an objector. I've also been engaged to lodge a couple of submissions now on behalf of the owners. Principally, the initial submissions were lodged and requesting further clarifications on the extent of the level of impact going on from the intended height of the proposal. Now, it was a little bit long in the tooth, but we eventually, the officers of the council succeeded in getting the applicant to lodge some height poles erected on the site. It consisted primarily of just the one on the leading edge of the upper addition. This wasn't articulated with any that fully described the outline of the primary addition of concern to my client towards the street. So in the limited time we had, like, this has literally all happened in the span of a couple of weeks, sort of right before preparation of this agenda through to now. The poles don't exist anymore. I'm not sure whether during your site inspection they were still present. My understanding they weren't. So to assist the panel in making their considerations, my client engaged some people to prepare some montaging, which was submitted to the officer last week. And I'm not clear whether or not they've been supplied to you. We were informed that they were. I don't know if the panel could at least let me know.
I have seen some montages in the material this afternoon, yes.
Right, okay. Look, in trying to keep the time frame stipulated, set out, the primary concern is the report has made some very broad brush statements about that it's all fine. The impact pursuant to clause 4.6 is relatively minor. However, obviously, my client wouldn't assert that isn't the case. And the concern I have overall is that the VLOS assessment has sort of made perfunctory statements towards tenacity, but there's no analysis there whatsoever about the principles of the Land Environment Court under Voloshin. And that is primarily like taking in the composition of the entire view afforded from the principal points of interest from the premises, from my client's premises. Voloshin broadly though, if you're looking at a whole composition, and what we're looking at here from key points throughout the my client's building is water outlook, reasonably high amenity stuff. Okay, we're not talking Harbour Bridge or anything, but we are talking as a complete composition, quite a good view. And the primary additions to the upper floors of my clients is going to pretty much will split the water component of the view. I can't really concur with the report to say that that's been analysed in any practical detail, especially hasn't looked at the, and this goes beyond like a height breach. It's really not even addressed as a coherent analysis later on in the DCP section, which is still valid to this issue. Look, we would just basically submit that the report hasn't gone into sufficient detail to, obviously, for us to be satisfied that the matters have been addressed. We believe the views particularly are quite devastating from multiple locations. So you should have a series of 4 montages, which we've prepared in the best possible time we had to give you an appreciation of the impact from certain locations. I would submit that they are quite a lot more significant than what's asserted in the report. The other area that I'd like to bring up in the limited time I've got is the window facing the street from the primary addition looking back towards the street. That's going to be a very near view to one of the like bedrooms of the client's dwelling, and that there is a condition there talking about privacy measures. I really would like the panel to just have a good view of that condition, preferably either reduce the size of the window in its entirety, size and scope, or you got to really examine the privacy, because the potential for cross view looking back into what's one of their bedrooms from. I'm not sure exactly what that room is going to be used for in the proposal, but yeah, hasn't been very well discussed in the report either. So one of the primary submissions that we made was we didn't have a lot of information. I still maintain that, because I'm not reading it and being able to advise my client that it's been adequately dealt with. So.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. I've got a question. Others may have one, but if I might just ask, you've spoken about the breaking up of the composition of the view. Can you just tell us a bit more about the court's decision in that, with the details of the case, and tell us a bit more about what the court found?
So Voloshin describes the situation where a view should not be just considered in isolation of like looking at maybe one component, but the entire composition of everything that you're getting, including the whole outlook. So now it also talks about what's reasonable under the views and under the controls, and what can be reasonably expected under the controls. Now, the report has described that the proposal is mostly compliant, but there's a small breach towards the water side of the site. But what it hasn't really gone into any specific details describing how the bulk and scale of the primary addition is actually is the component that actually breaks up the view in its entirety of its composition. So at least 2 of the montages show quite clearly that pretty much all the water component of the view, which is one of the most continuous features of the view, is pretty much cut in half by the primary addition. And I don't feel that that's really adequately discussed. I'm sorry?
I'm not sure where that came from.
Sorry. Yeah, so just to sum up, it's basically the fact that look at the outlook in its entirety from especially the upper levels of the dwelling will be pretty much chopped in its composition. So it talks about bulk and scale, and also there's the concept of a more skillful design might assist in like providing some alleviation to that impact. We're still using a pitched roof in this example. I would suggest or submit that a flat roof design could it wouldn't resolve my client's problems, but it would certainly go towards minimising the overall impact.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roth. Do any other members of the panel have questions? Yes, Annette.
You mentioned then that perhaps a flat roof might help. Are there any other suggestions that you might have that could potentially satisfy your client's position?
Look, Max, my client, is also registered to speak. I'm sure he will provide his own individual suggestions. I would say from a planning standpoint that a lower pitch or flat roof certainly can be an improvement. There could also be some consideration towards increasing the setbacks from the side. Perhaps I appreciate that they won't register as non-compliances with the report. I'm certainly not here suggesting that, but in consideration of bulk and scale and the view, some massaging or increasing of some of the side setbacks can certainly provide some relief.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Otherwise, do you have? That's it in terms of questions of yourself. Mr. Elderbell and Rachel Elderbell, are you on the call there? Do you wish to say anything or ask? Do you wish to present anything to the panel?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Look, I mean, Kim basically covered some of the issues. Our primary concern, to add to that, is also the concern of privacy, because essentially based on what we're seeing and based on the photo montages and the measurements we did, we feel that that addition is essentially coming into our backyard and into our living spaces and into our entertainment spaces. We actually were also concerned with the height poles, and I wanted them left on because I was organising for a surveyor to come in and just sort of check measure the survey points, because I was advised that the height poles at the front of the building weren't necessary, but I had engaged with a surveyor to basically come out and sort of do the necessary measurements to make sure that that what we were seeing was the fact, and if that was the case, then obviously the views would be dramatically diminished, both on the ground level where we entertain, because right now with what we've got, we do have views over Edith Bay, but with what's proposed, we essentially would then have to go all the way to the back of the premises to basically look out onto our water views, but we would still have a diminished view out over Edith Bay and over Lagana Waterway. But there's also then the concern of privacy. If I'm entertaining and I've got a bedroom window looking out at me, you know, how does that put me and my family when potentially there's somebody in that room? And I don't know what type of privacy windows they're going to put in, but I just don't feel comfortable knowing that there's a double, well, whatever size window that happens to be, looking both into my living room on the lower ground in my barbecue area, where we spend a lot of our time in the spring and summer months entertaining.
Thank you, Mr. Elderbell. Rakia, are you available, and do you wish to add anything to what has been said already?
Look, I think my husband and Kim have covered most points. I also like to address the privacy of the of our neighbour, because that was a massive also issue for them. So it's good to understand that it's not just us that are going to be affected by privacy, it's also them and based on previous experiences, what's been happening, that's really important to them too. So that was a bit of a shock to me when that was proposed. And again, yes, others might not see a property with the views as a huge impact, but it does impact our property and it does impact our life and it does impact the value of our property too. So I really feel that it's important to consider all aspects for us and for the neighbour, because this is a long-term thing. It's not just now, it's forever. And when does this, everything needs to be considered. So, yeah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. I've now got, I'll give the call to Alan Barglioni. Are you on the
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'll have to call Alan in.
Sorry?
I'll have to call Alan into the meeting.
Thank you, Cass. For those still on the call, we're just looking to call in another submitter, and then we'll get underway again. Thank you. Mr. Barglioni, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm on board now. Thank you.
Thank you. You've got the opportunity to address the panel and voice any views that you have about this matter.
Look, in broad terms, the only comment I wanted to make was that, and I guess I've probably outlined the bulk of that in my submission, that the owners were quite keen, as part and parcel of this development, to try and regain. Hello?
Yes, you're
and I'll call you back as soon as I can. Cheers.
Please leave a detailed message after the tone. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
I'm sorry. Apologies for that.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I've got you now. I'm sorry. I just had an interruption there.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, so the property owners there were keen, apart from the obvious gain, as they're a growing family and intend to spend quite some time in that property. They've experienced over the last couple of years rather an intrusion into their privacy, particularly in terms of their ability to entertain in their primary outdoor open space, which is the terrace which exists. I take it you've done your site meetings now, and there's a relatively large terrace on the foreshore side of the building.
Yes, we have.
Yes, and sort of quite a lot of loss of amenity and privacy in terms of their association with or their respective position in relation to the neighbour that's located to the east of the subject site. So one of the primary concerns in all of this was to, as I said, apart from gaining some viable space for this sort of adult sleeping and sort of, sitting area, was to gain as much as they could or retain some of their amenity and privacy to their primary outdoor space, which is that foreshore entertaining space. So that's about, in summary, what they were sort of aiming to achieve with the submission, and sort of explained with in terms of the assessment process moving forward. We didn't have much choice. I've chosen to locate the additional space in a pocket which would be quite well hidden from view, reduce as best we could the total height of development, and also be able to control the overall height that's subject to any variation in the requirement for the height. So I think we're reasonably successful in doing that, and I'm hoping we've achieved something that has slight impact, if any, in terms of the neighbouring properties, because there's some fairly substantial properties along that stretch of woodlands, and some that dwarf the subject site fairly considerably. So I'm hoping we've achieved what we set out to do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Paglioni. That's the end of the public session, or part of our meeting this afternoon. We've heard from all 9 of the speakers and submitters. Again, thank you for your participation and making time to present to us. We'll now go into closed session, have some further deliberations and make our decisions. And as I said at the outset, the minutes of the meeting will be up on the council's website within 2 or 3 days. Thank you very much.